was in the 4th Marine Division on Eagle. We have a monument that we built a group of us did about 15 years ago. At that time, there were no memorials for World War II veterans in the States, period. They were national. And we've continued that. They've had a group, it finally is down to one. I'm the one surviving one that keeps it going. But we have a monument there, and we honor it during the time of the Iwo Jima battle. We have a memorial ceremony there honoring the dead. You know, our country wasn't free. It's a lot of brave men have given their lives, and women, for our country and for the freedoms that we all enjoy. I hope you guys appreciate it. If you go to any other country, you realize how fortunate we are in America, how blessed we are. But I think that's about.
Yeah. So this is the National Cemetery at Leavenworth.
Yeah.
Where Fort Leavenworth is, Commander General Staff.
No, it's not. This is not the one at Fort Leavenworth. This is the National Cemetery at Eisenhower, the medical center.
Oh, okay.
The Veterans Administration one in Leavenworth, though. But
Right.
but it's Leavenworth. It's a larger cemetery.
Jerry
I've never given up in life. The Marines taught me that a long time ago.
Jerry Ingram was just 15 years old when he lied about his age
I lied about my age then. I haven't quit lying since.
and went to war.
No one could have imagined how the savage battle for Iwo Jima, how savage it would become after the first waves landed.
Like any battle, it's kill or be killed. It's not war is not nice. There's nothing nice about war at all. Every battle you never expected to survive, and the more battles I went through in the Pacific, the less chance I figured I'd have of coming home.
The raising of the flag over Mount Suribachi on the 23rd of February would also become an iconic symbol for America, for their resolve, and it would come to epitomize the fighting spirit of the United States Marine.
Our flag flew on a hill called Mount Suribachi. As we overcame the enemy, we knew you'd see freedom become victorious, and it was. You see.
At 90 years old, Ingram visits Leavenworth National Cemetery to honor his brothers and sisters lost years ago.
The only time I cried in all the years of the battle was when I walked over to the cemetery at Iwo Jima and saw those thousands and thousands of crosses. It's very, very emotional. You don't forget. And as Americans, we must never forget that our freedoms aren't free. They had to sacrifice and pay the price for our liberty.
Like George Westbrook, a 20-year Army veteran who came to recognize Ingram's bravery.
It's an honor and privilege to be able to stand up here with these people and be able to, we call them brothers and sisters because that's what they are, brothers and sisters to us.
More than anything, Ingram says it's important for people to remember for years to come.
Well, I think that's the only reason I'm here. I'm firmly convinced that God's left me here so that I can share the experiences that with faith and belief in our country, you can face anything.
Sheree Honeycutt, Fox 4 News.
Abby and Nick, the officers were treated for
back to
minor
the
injuries.
murders and the burning. I don't know how well these pictures will show up. There you guys were speaking. I'm glad Burns isn't in that one. That shot Burns was in kind of ruined the whole thing. Big mud. John, did you see him there?
Oh, is it?
All right.
I didn't pick that up for a minute.
Let's see. You do your thing. I got a map there. Whatever else you want me to do, you holler at me.
How much of it, do you want mostly military or what, my whole life or what?
Your whole life, Jerry.
Well, the first thing happened, I was born. That's it. No, I am a child of the Depression days, so as a result of that, very, very poor family. I left home when I was about 10, went out in the Raytown area of Kansas City and worked on different farms out there. I went in the Marines when I was 15. Right after World War II started in November of '42, which is a long time ago now. I originally went to Jack's Farm, which is it had just become a tank driving school, and I became a tank driving instructor at 15, and I'm very proud of my service in the Marines. At 16 then I was in combat as a tank commander. We made 4 landings in the Pacific with the 4th Marine Division. I made all 4 landings that they did. I was 16 at the first one, Royamore and the Kwajalein Atoll, then Saipan and Tinian in the Marianas, and then Jima. Then I came back to the States and was deployed over to North China as we took it back from the Japanese there with the 1st Marine Division then. So there's no, as I said there's nothing nice about war. It's just people killing people. But I firmly believe that violent people only understand violence. So as a result, we have to have strong armed forces and strong military, strong police, because there are the few wild ones out there that are going to try and do violence to us. But freedom isn't free. My children, I've got 3 daughters. I've been blessed with a large family. I have 3 daughters, and they used to sing in a group called Up With People many years ago, but they had a song, freedom isn't free, you have to sacrifice, you have to pay the price for your liberty, and you do. And the price we paid was very great. And the reason Iwo Jima is the icon of the Marine Corps is because the casualties we lost there. It's the only island that we had more casualties suffered than the enemy did. I've got a little bottle there with Iwo Jima sands on the black volcanic sands. They were very, very hazardous to get through. They're very tough to climb up or to drive through. And we lost over 6,800 Marines and sailors were killed there. There was over 25 or 26,000 that were wounded. There was 1 out of every 3 Marines that was on that island was either killed or wounded. As a result, we needed that though for the landing strip for the big bombers that were going from Tinian up to Japan and bombing there, but they didn't have enough fuel to get back to Tinian, so they would land there. And I remember the first one landed a few days after the battle was on, and it was on the airport. The airfield had shell hole craters all through it. This plane came in bumping, and it was all banged up and shot up. And I remember the great cheer that went up, when the first one landed. And I think there was, 30 or so thousand airmen, that were able to land there before the war was over. I have had an interesting life. I've faced a lot of adversity. One of the things the Marines and the good Lord's taught me is that you never give up. I have a plate here on my head. I had illegal, now they're called illegal aliens that had stolen a truck from his boss and hit me head on, and when I was traveling on business, maybe 65 or more years ago. And there's a little hole in between my eyes there that they were able to put a plate in. Since that time, they've been able to do that, but at that time they didn't know how to do it. They took about a third of my frontal lobe out, so I had to learn memory over again. I can remember I had a little small child, so I had to work, and I remember the first company that hired me, an advertising firm. I went out to call on banks and savings and loans, and they told me if I came in looking like that, because for about a year I had cerebral spinal fluid leak, so I didn't have a plate. I just had the hole there, and you could see the brain pulsating. Well, I like to see it pulsate. That's pulsation of life. And they said if I came in looking like that, well, they'd take a chance. They'd gamble on me, which, fortunately for me, then I was able to earn a living. After that, I traveled nationally for banks and savings loans. I was at a savings loan convention in '81 in Las Vegas. The only reason I'd be in Las Vegas. After the day was over, I took a walk, got some fresh air, and had dinner, and came back to my room, opened the window, and took my shoes off, started to relax, and I started hearing glass breaking. Well, being Las Vegas, I assumed it was a drunk throwing beer bottles, but they kept hearing the glass breaking. Well, I was on the 9th floor of the Las Vegas Hilton Hotel, and I was right next to the elevator. Unbeknownst to me at the time, it was arson set fire started on the 8th floor hotel lobby. But when I finally went over the window and looked, why, the fire was stair-stepping. It was, maybe 7 or 8 stories above my room. They had what happened was that they had flammable carpets on the walls to deaden the sound at that time, and they had plastic drapes, and they'd catch fire. Then the heat would break the glass, and the fire would go out, and it would hit the glass on the window of the elevator lobby above that, 1 floor up, and it would break that, and it was stair-stepping on up that way. And at that time, they didn't have fire doors, so it would fireball down the hallways, maybe 100 feet each way when it would break into that lobby. I went to the door and felt it, and it felt it was all right to get out. I went on out, and the fire was right next to my room, so I couldn't go to the stairs that were next to that on the other side of the elevator. So, but there was a fellow standing out there, and we fussed at him, an employee, and said, "Why aren't you hollering fire?" And I started hollering fire, and 3 other fellows came out, and we, this man who I think was the arsonist, he told us to go down the hall to the center elevator, which is about 100 feet in, or 125 feet. We went by, as we went down the hall, the smoke was enough that it blocked the exit signs that were up at the top. Well, now if you'll notice on airplanes, like they've got a little marker on the floor there, well, that was the result of that. So something good comes out of everything, whatever it is in life, something good comes out of it. And we went on down the hall and went by stairwells because we didn't know they were there, and got in the lobby in the elevator, and as soon as we did, I knew we'd done wrong. I had my briefcase with me. And the elevator went down 1 floor, and at that time they had heat sensors on the elevators, and all the lights lit up then, and smoke poured in. Well, I didn't know if there was a wall or a floor there, so I dropped to my knees and felt there was a floor, so I started crawling very fast. But I hadn't crawled maybe 10 feet when I still hear it. I heard one guy say, "Oh my God," and then I heard his body hit the floor in the elevator. So the other 3 fellows didn't make it. I crawled into the fire. I was praying all the time. I'm a strong Christian believer. And I started crawling on down the hall, and I saw a light, and it was a light under a door. And the door was, airline stewardess was inside, standing on a chair holding towels to the top of the door. When she realized she could put a towel at the bottom of the door and shut the smoke from coming in there. And she was just jumping off her chair when I knocked on the door and said, "Help, I'm dying." And she let me in, and I said, "I've been praying to get out of that, fire." And she started crying because she said, "Oh, you're a Christian too." She said, "I didn't want to die by myself." Well, about then the phone rang, and it was her mother calling. Her mother, they'd been there together, and her mother was down watching the guys throw their money away in the slot machines. And while she came up to brush her teeth after having dinner, so she told her mother, "Don't worry." She said, "I'm fine. There's a guy in the room with me." Well, her mother, like mothers the world over, said, "What kind of a guy is in there?" I said, "Well, a fat, bald-headed, lucky one. That's what it was." We went on out, and firemen got us out after about an hour and a half. As a result of that, I've had a huge amount of surgeries. Maybe after 400, I quit counting, literally. In fact, I just was at the Shawnee Mission Med Center yesterday evening at the wound care.
Don't you have something today?
Pardon?
You have something today?
No, that was last night.
Last night.
Yeah, they, unfortunately, I don't have bandages on forever. I've been going there once a month for the last 15 years or so, I guess, and getting scraped on. That's why they started on a fat head, because they got a lot to whittle on. But on the graft area is why I grow everything except hair on my bald head. I get squamous and basal cell cancers in the graft area, and as a result, I've had in surgeries all over my body. In fact, I've had bone tumors out of my legs because I found that smoke kills whereas fire burns. So the chemicals I ingested have resulted. I've had all kinds of funny things growing on me.
How
Except
many cancers you think you've had?
Okay, how many cancers?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I know at one time I had 35 of them at one surgery. I've had surgery all over my face, scars, but I have an excellent plastic surgeon. If Dr. McGrath up there that's done an excellent job for the last 15 years. I had another plastic surgeon before that, but he gave up on me. I had my head, I've got a picture in my, here we have to get through if you'd like it. Somebody wants to see something gory, you can see my head. When I had a spot about like that, like it wouldn't heal. And they have a long time not healing, but I'm still here, so I have no complaints at all. God's blessed me with today. Did you?
What happened after the fire? Didn't you have a trial?
Pardon?
The trial?
Oh yeah, well, fortunately about a year later I was able to testify against the arsonist. Well, the guy I'd seen was scruffy haired and the work coveralls on, but the fellow we saw in court was cleaned up in white shirt and tie and short cut hair, and but he got 9 life sentences, one on top of the other, which means he won't ever get out. I don't know how many. I know there was at least 9 were killed. In fact, one fellow jumped out of the window above me. He was in the room above, and he stayed in his room, and the fire got to him, and he jumped out the window. Because I've seen pictures from the arson investigators where you can see where his hands had scraped the smoke, as he slid down the wall. All of a sudden, my mind's blank on I ran out of money after 1 year. I had 35 surgeries, I think it was. So I went for the world record. So in fact, if you've known Shawnee Mission Hospital, I've been there since they opened, and every one of those buildings I've helped pay for there. I think. I ran out of money in insurance, and I didn't know there were lifetime limits on insurance. And I went back to work, and I am very proud to say that I sell fire equipment to the fire departments, including the Olathe Fire Department, the equipment, the turnout gear that they wear, fighting fires, and they take awful good care of this old Marine.
And you're still doing that now?
Yeah, I'm working full time. Yeah, I have a store down in Ottawa, Kansas, and I live in Kansas City, and I drive down there every day. I drive about 100 miles a day, I guess. So you never give up. That's the thing the Marines taught me. In fact, in boot camp, we had a drill instructor that had been at Pearl Harbor. He'd been there when it was attacked by the Japanese, and as a result, he made us do everything extra. If we dug a foxhole, we dug it a foot deeper than anybody else did, the other platoons that were there. If we went out, at that time they'd allow us to swim with our gear on, and we had to go out 100 yards further than anybody else and come back in, But I've thought, and at the time I begrudged him very much that, but you can't overtrain. I came back home alive, so I cannot, and I have to attribute part of that to his training of you. Just don't give up. I was in North China with the 1st Marine Division as we took it back from the Japanese, and it was incredibly poor up there at that time. They would strip bark off the trees. To eat, they'd put sand in their food. I can remember seeing the Marshall Plan, which was planned to provide food to countries that were starving, and they would bring those bags of rice in. We were on guard duty, and they would take them in carts. Well, instead of taking them out to where they're poor and starving, where they'd take them up to the mayor's compound, and he'd deal them out to his buddies. But I've seen them take a knife and cut a bag of rice, so it dropped on the street, and it was just dirt streets, so dirt and dung and everything was there, and they'd knife fight over a handful of that rice and dung. At that time, they was incredibly poor. So. And very, very starving. I also picked up amoebic dysentery while I was in service, which is a 1-cell animal that eats red blood cells. and you have a very bad dysentery from it, hemorrhage a lot. The survival rate on that's not too well either after a period of time, but I had about 8 or 10 years. I'll have to tell them a funny one now.
You should tell that one.
All right.
Well, a lot of guys got dysentery in the Pacific
Yeah.
because of the sanitation.
Well, in the food, we were eating raw food. If we'd see vegetables or something, we'd grab it, and which we shouldn't have, because they use human feces to fertilize their food with, and as a result, the cycle of those one-cell animals was just repeated and repeated and repeated. But when I came back home, I'd been 4 years overseas, and they asked me if it was all right when I got to the States, and I said, oh yeah, but I've had dysentery real bad right then. Well, about 4 days later, I went up to the Veterans Hospital. Well, at that same one, at that time they called it Wadsworth up at Leavenworth. And it was great. I didn't know about how they treated people. They had me in a room. They had a curtain they had a curtained area over the door, and I'd have a private nurse. And I really thought, oh, man, they really take good care of the veterans. Well, I didn't realize that one day I heard a couple of guys cleaning. They were talking about people being in St. Peter's room. They would put you in there when they thought you were going to croak. So I thought, well, I'm not going to die in this place. I got up, and I didn't know protocol. I hadn't learned the Marines. You had to do this, this, or this. Well, I wasn't going to go down and battle for my clothes because I thought I'd be in trouble. So I just went ahead, and this is the truth now. I got out, and you know how your hospital gowns are with the buttons down the back and your hind end hanging out. I was on used one of those and wore just that and got out and hitchhiked home to Kansas City. And what's crazy about that, and as crazy as I am, but it was crazy, the guy, can you imagine somebody picking up somebody with a gown on like that? I thought it wouldn't happen in today's world, but it did back then, fortunately for me.
Well, you went back up there though, didn't you?
Yeah, I went back up a couple of weeks later to get my clothes, and at that time they had hundreds and thousands of veterans pouring in, so the hospitals were all full, and I went down to get my clothes in the clothing room. As I was asking for them, the guy said, Ingram, he said, Ingram, oh, you're the guy, and he went and whispered to the next guy. Pretty soon the whole room was looking and pointing at me and laughing because they had been crazy enough to get out there with just that stupid nightgown on. But when life laughs at you, you have to laugh back. If there's one thing I can propose to you is, I've had a lot of testings and trials in the world, probably 90% more than most people do. But you never give up, I'm a strong Christian believer, and I believe with God's faith, He's allowed me to be around just for reasons like this, to share with you that you don't give up. And we have a wonderful country, and I'm very patriotic, very much a flag waver, because the flag itself is just a piece of cloth, but it's what it symbolizes, It symbolizes all those brave young men and women who have given their lives for our country over the years, and the other sacrifices that have been done so that you all can be free today, I've got a newspaper article here that says what I believe, that I battled because I went to war because I wanted my children's children to be free, and they are free. In fact, I have 3 daughters, 7 grandchildren, and 13 great-grandchildren now, so I've been blessed with a lot of life. But our young folks today, they're all volunteers. They're out there doing the same thing for you all right now. There's a whole bunch of pictures here. Yeah, you might
I'm going to tell them what this is.
Yeah.
We saw this yesterday, but this is some of the volcanic sand.
It's black volcanic sand, and it has on there, I was given that as an award. I speak quite a bit at Marine functions until they tell me to shut up. But it shows on there, it tells how many were killed at Iwo Jima and wounded. But the volcanic sand, excuse me, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
No, I'm Jerry.
Yeah, you're not fine.
I'm a bad joker.
When you get a chance and talk about being homeless. It was in Rosedale, wasn't it? Is that where you were running around before you joined the Marine Corps in KCK?
No, I was in Raytown area.
Raytown, that's right. So when Pearl Harbor happened, you joined up. You went to tank commander school.
Yeah.
what kind of tanks did they give you? Where'd you get them? And what was your
Well,
job?
at that time, when I first went there, it's a driving school, and they had Giberson diesels, which are the old beat up dinky little tanks that you had to, even to get them started, you had to fire a shotgun shell to get the motor started. It was that antiquated. In fact, when we went in combat, our tanks, we picked them up. We had the first ones to have Sherman tanks in the Marines, and we picked them up just a week before we went to combat, but they were stamped on the side of them. We got them from the Army, and there was on green paint. I always remember there was yellow stamped on them. Reject, U.S. Army, Treasure Island Terminal, up in San Francisco. They had been rejected by the Army. We just painted them out and used them. You can. The Marines have a philosophy that you can do, you will do, and you make do. But you take care of, you do what you have to with what you have. Like you have to put up with him, so you. He
This is
didn't.
an Army Sherman tank, as Jerry pointed out.
Another thing on tanks, and when we were in combat, they had a lot of the. They weren't kamikaze type Japanese soldiers. They would come up and commit. They'd take and put shape charges on the side of the tank. A shape charge was designed so they'd blow the side of the tank in. But we, as a result, put wood sides on our tanks, so you'd see them dragging around with all kinds of timbers dragging off the side where they'd been blown off, and you'd think the tank was all beat up, but it wasn't, just the wood. We put sandbags on the top of them for the same reason. And we'd have one tank behind. They would machine gun fire cover the tanks in front of it when they would try to get up there and put those explosives on. There's again, nothing nice about war.
Well, and for the most part, you guys couldn't move without infantry guys with you because of that, right?
Well, we went together. We were we in the Marines. We weren't used as tanks against tanks. We were tanks against pillboxes, we were always within the first or second wave of landing on the islands as well.
And then I pulled up this map. So the Marianas are here, which is where Tinian and Saipan are. And the distance was about 5,000 miles to go here, but this is where the bombers took off that dropped the nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But you can see how Iwo Jima is halfway between. So we had taken, it was from Tinian, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the Enola Gay, yeah.
Right.
Which,
You can see that several thousand miles, the Pacific's so big that it's bright along the way here. And I pulled up, not that this helps you too much, but this is actually, whoops, that's not very big. This is actually what would be an operational map from Iwo Jima, but we landed all through here. You remember which area you landed?
ours was to the top of the map.
Up here.
Yeah.
And this was the first airfield. And the thing I showed you yesterday about them charging across where Gunnery Sergeant Basilone was killed, this is where they were trying to cut off Mount Suribachi because it could fire straight down this area. So how was this battle different than Tinian and Saipan, besides the number of casualties?
That was about it, I think. Just one of the things I might mention, we were on the first islands, Roy and the Moore, that we hit. We were able to go across the airfield within a very few minutes, which they hadn't expected, and as a result, we were fired on by the naval ships there, our naval ships, because they thought they were Japanese tanks. So as a result of that, we thought that when we went to the next battle with Saipan, that they painted somebody with the brains, thought they paint yellow, like the police cars have got the number on the top of them and the white. We had yellow tops and the black numbers on them. Well, that's great, except when we got to Saipan, it had a volcanic mountain just like Iwo Jima did, and they just blew the daylights out of us. They could zero in on that. There was just X marks the spot. In fact, we normally there's great confusion on landing, and we were landed by the ships on the wrong beach. Excuse me. One of the things is I got my throat burned, and when I was in the fire, so I react at times. Pardon me for drinking in front of you. Anybody want to share? In fact, have you ever? My throat closes at times with the scars in there, and so I have to get it stretched. Have you guys ever seen how they stretch the throat in surgery? Well, they take this tree limb and they take this rope and throw up over the corner of it, and it's got a big knot in it. Bad joke. I digress from what I was.
You were talking about how they stretch your esophagus.
Oh, yeah. But they do. They have a little ring that they stretch out in there that stretches it out, and you're awake while they're doing it. It's very uncomfortable. But they always do a biopsy to see if there's cancers in there. Thank God I haven't had any in there.
How do they get you to stop talking long enough to put that ring?
Never.
That's coming from somebody that talks a lot. How often do they have to do that?
Oh, just when it stops where I can't even swallow. Somewhere I've swallowed, as you can notice by my girth, I've been able to eat a little bit along the way. This is actually, I'm about 50 pounds lighter than I used to be. But I used to be more of a man than this old goat is now. But God's blessed me with a lot of years of life. One of the other things I do is I sing in a choir. I still do it. First Baptist out in Raytown, and have for many years. And I love singing. And I felt when I first got burned, I was on oxygen for about 5 years, and I shot and buried that oxygen bottle in. And got rid of it, but I feel that singing has probably helped a lot as far as surviving. If you guys got any questions, maybe that'd be another way to turn it here, because my mind went blank, which is normal.
Jerry?
Yes, sir.
I'll just say one thing about that map. Iwo was a small little island. I mean, you could get across it if you were hiking.
Oh, yeah.
A couple hours or so. That little island, for 30 days, the slaughter, just imagine the volume of the slaughter that went on in that place just for the Americans, the Marines that were there. I think I shared with you when I was in here that I was in Vietnam in 1970. The whole year in Vietnam was just about the same casualties as they had in 30 days. So that gives you an idea of just what a slaughter that campaign.
Yeah, I never received a Purple Heart. I never was wounded. And people have asked me many times, well, how I could go that many battles without. Well, I did one thing. I died fast. Another bad joke.
It was 7.5 miles, and yesterday was we were watching. Did you hear or how did you guys deal with, and when did you figure out that the Japanese had tunneled all through the island? The tunnels and the train they moved.
Oh, when you got in there, they started blasting at us, and you realized it was the intelligence information had been completely wrong about it. They thought it would just four or 5 days to take the island, and it said it was just a network and a maze of tunnels. It was incredible the work they had done there, and as a result, it was just. Excuse me. Go ahead, sir.
How did you approach that? How did
Very carefully.
how did you go into these tunnels that were mazes and you didn't know?
Well, there were just some very brave men that went in there, guy. We had flamethrowers as well that they would fire in there, because a flamethrower, besides doing the horrible thing of burning, which I've learned isn't what you want to have happen to you. Why, it takes the oxygen out of the air, so a lot of them would suffocate. But it was, and the dogs. They had a lot of dogs that were used in there to go in, and find out where the people were.
So my understanding is, to go back to something else you mentioned, and not to choke you up any more than I have to, but this is on Iwo Jima itself. You can see Mount Suribachi. They had the 4th and 5th Marine Division cemeteries there, but I think they brought a lot of those guys home, did they not?
Yes, no,
So they had grave registration units who went out and so they could account for at people as fast as possible. Because that's something else the Marine Corps teaches you. You never leave anybody behind. If you get to them, you get them regardless of the risk, and you expect your buddies to do so, and they do. And then all those people were brought home that we could designate, I think.
But all those crosses you see were in 30-some days.
Yeah. And that's just one of the divisions.
Yeah.
There's another cemetery for the 4th. I did
Yeah,
have...
we had the most casualties by far of the
I did
unfortunate.
have, this is from Lejeune in 2015. Wasn't that your last muster? You
Yes,
want to tell me about that?
Yeah, we, the 4th Marine Division, of course, attrition of all the old goats dying off. So we had our last muster as an association in 2015 there and at Camp Lejeune, and they treat us very, very well there. The 2nd Marine Division honored us. They had, all their troops were out, and we had a week of ceremonies. There was their and Marines honor Marines. They respect the traditions. We have. Once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. I'm still a Marine. But I didn't just get here. There's a lot of brave, a lot of foolish, a lot of scared, a lot of unknowing people that have given their lives so our nation could be free, and the Marine Corps could be the Marines. We feel very much about training, and that's why, same way in school, get your education. I didn't have it, I only had 2 years of high school when I went in the Marines. I came back out and went to the accelerated high school veterans course they had. They wouldn't let me go back to high school. I wanted to go back and play football. At that time I was much bigger, but I understand why now. I had 4 years in the Marines. I was a completely different person than you young folks are, and thank God for it, that you haven't had to see it. But the training you get here, I went 2 years to the accelerated veterans, and I went ahead to, at that time it was Kansas Junior College, and I got my associates, and then I went on to KU, and I've got a Bachelor of Science in Education, physical education, if you believe that. But get your education, guys. Get your education. It means all the difference in the world. And once somebody puts that in you, nobody can take it out. Any other questions you might have? Because I'd sure like to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
So with the 30 days and seeing all of the crosses that were on the cemetery, what, in the mindset, what kept you going after seeing so many?
What was what now?
What kept in your mindset? What was going on in your head to keep you going throughout those 30 days?
Well, you had to. That's all. It's a matter of you kill or be killed. That's very basic, but also, I was doing it for. I've had no greater honor than to serve God's country in the Corps, and it was for our country, for the freedoms that we have, and we knew there was only one way of doing it, by winning, and the Marines are winners, believe me.
How much sleep were you running on, Jerry? How much sleep did you get on Iwo Jima?
Not much. When we used to have, they talk about the different rations they give folks. Well, in tanks they gave us a little bag of hard candy. That's all you ate for the first few days, because that's all you wanted. It was very, very uncomfortable in the tanks. Well, I'm gonna tell a story here. And I hope you ladies will apologize to you for it, but because I had amoebic dysentery. When you have diarrhea, it's very bloody and very bad. I had it while I was in the tanks. Well, unfortunately, you can't get out of a tank when you're in combat and there's Japanese all around you, and I would have to eliminate, and I use a shell case. They had 50 caliber machine gun cartridges that were in a metal case, and I'd use that metal case. And I don't know how those other poor folks in that
ammo can?
tank. Pardon?
Ammo can?
Ammo can, yeah. And you have to use that, and I've always wondered how those poor guys in the tank with me had to suffer through the smells.
Do Do you know what's happened now since everybody has those bottles like you've got? Have you seen what the Afghanistan and Iraqi guys do? So they use that as a tactical pee bottle so they don't have to get out. The problem is, so many of them chew tobacco, they also use that as a spit cup. So what happens is they will mix up in the vehicle, so your buddy will grab the wrong
Cup.
he
Oh,
thinks this is water, or it'll either be full of urine or full of spit. Yeah.
well, happy day. One battle story. When we were on Saipan, when we got landed on the wrong beach, why we got out of the tanks then to see, you know, we would compare maps with different tank commanders did to see what was going on, where we were at, and where we were supposed to be. Well, as a result of that, we started getting shelled. Well, then we couldn't get back in the tanks. We dove under the tanks. Well, I dove under a tank with a gunny sergeant, and one shell hit the tank. Well, fortunately, at the time I didn't realize it, but fortunately later on, we were, he kept saying I'm hit and I'm bleeding. Well, I reached over and it's just hot, just liquid all over the place. So I grabbed my shirt off and put a tourniquet on his leg, and it kept, finally there was a lull in the fighting, and he kept saying there's more and more, and it was just, you know, it was covering me too. And finally the shells, I pulled him out from under the tank then. Well, the guy hadn't been hit at all. What happened is we were, instead of gasoline engines, our tanks were the first ones to have diesel engines, and that shell had hit where the diesel was, and so instead of exploding, why it just broke it on down, and that was hot diesel fuel dripping on him. And he went psycho because of it, and you know, he taken back to the States. But you know, life is life. You got to laugh at it.
There was a term, and I hadn't heard it until I started reading these biographies, called going Asiatic.
And that's what they call PTSD now, post-traumatic syndrome.
I had not heard that until recently. They said,
oh, really?
Gone Asiatic.
Yeah.
That meant you lost your mind.
Yeah. Or lose your marbles or something, or whatever terminology you want to say. Yes, sir.
Other than just had to keep fighting because that was your orders and that was your duty, like, how did you keep from going insane? Seeing.
Well, you just did what you had to do. That's my belief in life, guy. You just don't give up.
There was a lot of people that did, though.
Yeah. But I just don't understand. That's not my mindset, guy. You just don't give up. I've had I think, well, starting back when I got hit with a truck and had brain surgery, but the percentage of survival at that time was about 5% on that type of surgery I had. And it's the same way, amoebic dysentery after 5 or 10 years, over in the world there's probably 50% fatalities in that. You know, it just, and then on a hotel fire, well, I've just, been able to overcome, through God's help, and to keep me around to see story to you all today.
How much did your company help you after that?
Push the button, didn't you? I've been 17 years with Marlin Firearms Company as Director of Marketing, selling advertising to banks and savings and loans nationally. And they dropped me like a hot potato because their insurance didn't cover for some reason.
And remember, you were in Vegas representing them.
Yeah, I was there. They representing them at their...
At Candy. No, afterwards, because it was medical bills.
Yeah. So that's one reason I went back to work. But I love what I'm doing. I want to work till I drop, guys, and I hope that's many years down the road. But I cannot understand retiring or going sitting in the corner. I'd vegetate, and as loquacious as I am, well, I like to jabber a lot, so I want to talk as long as I can, and to share my experiences, because there's always something. There's something good comes out of everything,